The Netherlands will start buying out farmers' businesses at between 100 and 120% of their appraised value. This plan was approved on Tuesday by the European Union as part of a plan to cut nitrogen emissions by half by 2030. This is something that Dutch farmers have been fighting for years, not just months. We've been covering it for months, but they have been because this plan has been taking shape, they've been warning us that the government wants their farms. They were right. This literally means that farmers who've been protesting have just sort of quite literally lost the farm. And what happens if they don't want to sell? Well, many of them will be forced to because the government will refuse to renew licenses or set new rules that drives them out of business anyway. Here's a statement from the Dutch politician who was pushing for this, that she says the 1.47 billion euro Dutch scheme we approved will facilitate the voluntary how voluntary? Well, they're going to pretend it's voluntary. Closure of livestock farming sites with substantial nitrogen deposition on nature conservation areas. The schemes will improve the environmental conditions in those areas and will promote more sustainable, environmentally friendly production in the livestock sector without unduly distorting competition. Now, according to this scheme, the government will buy out and dismantle some 3,000 farms close to nature reserves. They're saying this is a voluntary buyout scheme that targets the top polluting small to medium livestock farmers and is part of a larger scheme to reduce soaring nitrogen emissions in the Netherlands. But is it true? And is it just, if that's really true, and it's just about saving the nature reserves area. So they show us these videos where people are going out and measuring with these, I think they blue or green boxes, and they set them up all over, and they're like, oh yes, a lot of nitrogen in this area, right? And so they're saying the nitrogen runoff is hurting these wetlands areas, these protected wetlands areas. But if it's true that it's just about these wetland areas and preserving these nature reserves, well, then why not let these people farm someplace else? That is maybe in a better geographic location. They can't. This is from the European Commission. Again, the announcement we just showed you says under the schemes, the beneficiaries guarantee that the closure of their production capacity is definitive and irreversible, and that they will not start the same breeding activity elsewhere in the Netherlands or within the EU.
So it's like signing an NDA. Like, we're going to buy you out. You're not going to then start farming anywhere else now.
You can never do this kind of farming again. You're done. So maybe you say, okay, I'll move and I'll do cattle farming in, Poland or whatever. Nope, that's in the EU. You cannot. So if you love your job, if you love, I'm going to play you later a clip from a woman who's a cattle rancher in Wyoming who legitimately loves raising cattle. She loves her animals. She's going to have to say no, say goodbye to that. She's third or fourth generation business. You can't do it unless you want to move to China or Russia or Japan. South America or whatever, right? Yeah. You cannot do it inside the EU.
Agriculture is arguably the oldest profession on the planet. That's basically why we have civilization, is through agriculture. How can they in 2023 not realize that if you get rid of farmers, you cannot have a civilization? Any civilization whatsoever.
Because this is what the World Economic Forum wants, right? They want to provide us with the processed fake food, right? That's going to be industrialized. They're arguing, of course, that these farms that they'll shut down are near sort of city areas, right? Well, there's parks and sort of green zones where they're going to then put in, condensed apartment complexes so they can create these sort of 15-minute cities. Well,
you make a good point about the trade-off here, because a lot of the things that they intend to do have a negative carbon footprint. Much more so than farming. And we're going to talk about that in a second.
Fake meat, Beyond Meat, or any of the other crap that they're going to foist on us, to Philip's point, it's all worse. It's all worse than what they're doing right now. It's all worse than any of this impact that the farmers have on this land.
Well, I'm going to present you some data that might go against the fact that cows' methane emission is a negative impact on the environment. We're going to get to that in a second. But the Netherlands is one of the world's largest agricultural producers, second only to the U.S. So do they care about replacing this food that they will take out of production? It sort of seems like they don't, especially because these farmers have said they've been trying to work with the government to make changes in the way that they farm. But the government simply refused. They dug their heels in. They had it in their head that they wanted these places shut down, and they would not be deterred. Watch.
Eén probleem, namelijk stikstof.
Wij willen vooruit. Er moet een transitie plaatsvinden in de landbouw en die kunnen wij maken. Alleen dan moet de overheid ons wel faciliteren.
Bislang folgten die Bauern der Logik mehr Vieh, mehr Milch, mehr Geld. Nach dem Wegfall der europäischen Milchquoten wuchsen die Betriebe, auch Omgos Hof. Jetzt hat er auch die Nachbarfarm übernommen und will umstellen auf naturnahe Viehhaltung. Aber
Our bank said no, you go milk the intensive way with 240 cows. Then I said no, I don't want that. We go the nature inclusive way with 180 cows.
die Regierung will Betriebe aufkaufen und schließen, notfalls auch zwangsweise. Wütende Bauern organisieren deshalb seit 3 Jahren Blockadeaktionen. Auch Omgo machte mit und wurde bei Auseinandersetzungen mit der Polizei am Kopf verletzt.
Okay. So the government now says they will reimburse these farmers for the cost of buying up the farm and the cost of them moving their families and sort of breaking camp, so to speak. And they're saying, hey, it's not going to hurt. We're going to, pay for every little step of the way. But again, it sort of leaves out this idea that so many of them are 3rd, 4th generation farmers. This is something that they love. And one of the woman that I'm about to introduce you to, her name's Casey Atkinson. She's an American cattle rancher and I just today, as I was studying this story, happened upon her on the Wealthability podcast. And she talks about how farmers are the most trustworthy profession. Like when you ask the public of all of these professions, do they trust them or not? Like lawyers, doctors, media professionals, what have you. Farmers have a consistently high trust ratio, like trust reporting. And yet these are the people we're going after. These people, like you just saw, they're saying, okay, we'll move to new techniques. We're willing to improve. We have to. And in fact, Casey Atkinson later says, we have to improve because the population is growing and we only have so much land. So we inevitably always have to improve new technologies. We're willing to do that. Governments are just giving them a flat out no. Now listen to what she says about whether or not cows are responsible to climate change due to methane emissions. I think this is fascinating.
I think the first one, obviously, is we get hammered a lot from an environmental perspective, right? And methane emissions. Yep. Well, methane emissions from ruminant animals are not new. We had buffalo in this country for hundreds of years that were ruminant animals that were emitting the exact same methane that my cattle are emitting today. So my cattle aren't adding methane to the atmosphere. They're helping actually recycle it. Methane breaks down in 10 to 15 years. They graze plants, which encourages those plants to pull that carbon back out of the atmosphere and to store it underground, to spread out, to grow, to diversify, all of those good things. And so it's part of this cycle that has been ongoing for hundreds and hundreds of years. What is new is humans, right? And their carbon emissions, electricity, burning fossil fuels in transportation. We waste 40% of the food that we produce in this country. It ends up in a landfill. Well, when food rots in a landfill, it also creates methane. That is methane that didn't used to go into the atmosphere. And so, understanding where these additional greenhouse gas emissions come from, and it's not my cows, I think would be one important thing. The University of Florida did this cool study where they found that you could eat beef for almost 40 years for the same environmental impact as using your cell phone for 1 year. And I was raised before cell phones were a thing. So I do know that we can, in fact, live without them, even though we don't think so.
Wow.
So...
yeah, so all of the...
I want to hear that whole interview.
All of like the demon...
Yeah, seek it out. It's fascinating.
So all of like the demonization of meat and, it's really, what we try to do is cut through the propaganda. You've been sold. And she makes the point in this interview, Because there's like Netflix documentaries. They put on these like Netflix documentaries that everyone's, have you seen that with like forks over knives? Have you seen Cow Nation or whatever?
She's like, they don't even talk to us. They never come and actually ask, about our methods and
ranchers and like what it's actually. It's all. Yeah.
And actually, she's right. I read a book last year called Braiding Sweetgrass, about a woman who is a Native American botanist. She studied sweetgrass, which is these plants that are native to the plains in the United States, and found that they do much better when they are grazed by ruminant animals, because the enzymes in the saliva of grazing animals actually promote the production. They grow a ton better when there are animals around to eat them. We really do need this. Now, I went to seek her out on Instagram, and I found that she's been posting about this quite a lot. Here is what she says about her cows and the ecosystem. She says that without cows, and I know you can't read this, but you can find the post yourself and then see what she's saying, that up to 30% of the world's carbon wouldn't be safely sequestered under the soil without cows, and instead would be released back into the atmosphere. And her cows, she says, remove the equivalent of 6 billion cars every year from the atmosphere. Without cattle, the planet would in fact be much worse off, and the changes we would need to make to compensate for them would be drastic. She says, plus on top of their climate benefits, cows are a powerhouse, making tasty, nutritionally dense protein for us to eat. She says, cows are cool. It's undisputable. Clearly, she loves her cows. I do recommend that you seek out this Wealthability podcast. It was the most recent, and with my friend Tom Wheelwright. Now, she says that in public surveys, farmers are the one profession that keeps their reputation. So why are we standing by while they get dumped on the hardest? It's something we collectively should ask. I'm not saying this is exactly the same, but I think it's important to remember that there was another time in recent history that the government started snatching up mass farmland, and people ended up dying. This is what I'm showing here. You here is an image of Kharkiv during collectivization period under the Stalin-led Soviet Union, when Stalin ordered his police to seize privately held farms in Ukraine and turn those into grain farms. And more than 1 million farmers were exiled and tens of thousands starved, many of them children. So this is an extreme example, but one worth keeping in mind when we do actually see government seizure of private farmland, moving this land into now government property.
Yeah. And so, it's like Todd Walsh wants to know, like, whose side are you on this? Well, we're on the side of the farmers in this. That's the side we're on this. Because you have, and when they're using these fake climate policies to run these farmers out of business and destroy the food chain that they can then control, is it any wonder why Bill Gates then now owns 27,000 acres and buys up all of the farmland? All of these large companies and corporations are pouring the money into buying up land in Ukraine and consolidating all of this power so that we don't have cows, we don't have meat, we eat fake meat, we eat all this processed stuff that they make billions of dollars off of. They don't make the money off of these farmers.
And they're not making a causal association between methane emissions of cows and other global warming. And remember that a lot of this was prompted because of building construction projects that they wanted to do in urban centers. And in the Netherlands, they hit a carbon emissions limit and said, well, we got to take it from somewhere. So did they maybe stop building in urban centers or reduce technology or what have you? No, they went to take it from farmers, which seems so nonsensical. And even in some of these videos that were produced by the Dutch government, where they have these dudes going out to the boxes and like, oh, look at that, a lot of methane here, a lot of methane here. And what they say is scientists have proven, or scientists have linked methane to this. So it's like methane in general, there is no conclusive evidence that it's the cow's fault. And so, it's interesting that we have this scapegoat, get it?
Scapegoat, yeah.
Is a grazing animal because they are all medium to large size animal farms that'll be shut down. So
Go ahead, David.
Scapegoat.
And I just want to point out really quick, it's
Okay.
270,000 acres. Bill Gates owns, not 27,000.
Oh, okay. I thought that was low when I said it. Yeah. Some people are really defensive of Netflix in here in the chat. I just wanted to address that. So West is best in the chat says Forks Over Knives is a highly educational documentary. Clearly Redacted has not watched it in its entirety. We have.
I have.
We have.
Yeah.
And you missed my point. I didn't denounce it and say that we made the point that when they make these documentaries, they don't actually consult actual ranchers. They're not sitting there, and these people don't come out to these ranches and see the entire process of how these animals are raised, grazed, etc.
Right.
That was the point.
Well, she talks about how, I mean, I'm not speaking against any Netflix documentary at all, but she
neither
talks
am I. I'm
about
just making the point that what she said in the
her point is that these Netflix documentaries give a perspective that may not be completely accurate. And in fact, the book that I've mentioned several times, The Secret Life of Groceries, that man went and spent time at a pig farm. And I think he also was, I don't know if he was a vegetarian or not. And he was like, I was expecting these like terrible horrors, and you don't see that. So, there is an agenda out there to make you think one thing or another. I don't really care what you think about what to eat. I think it's interesting, though, to see these government moves where they take from one group and not another.
And all we're asking you is to not fall for the propaganda. Like choose how you want to live and eat how you want to eat. Like that's why we're all free. You can do whatever you want, right? You can smoke cigarettes for all I care.
She talks about how now farmers feel like they need this social license. Like, what are they trying to do? Are they trying to get rich? She talks about how a farmer aims to break even, and in most years they won't. They will lose money. And so farmers budget on a 10-year cycle, and they budget that they hope 3 years out of 10 they will make money, 3 years out of 10 they'll lose money, and 4 years they'll break even. So what does someone like that want other than to like feed you her healthy cows? You have to think about that. And again, whatever you decide to eat tonight, that's on you. I think what we're trying to show you here is the new form of collectivization.
But I would also point out, this is important on this Netflix topic. I love Netflix. There's a lot of great shows on Netflix that we watch, and a lot of great documentaries. We just watched the Bernie Madoff one. Always look at who makes the films and writes the books and produces these films. Where's the money coming from? When you end up watching one of these documentaries and you watch the credits and you see that, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation provided funding for this documentary, that should set off alarm bells. What's the purpose of them funding these things, right? Or the organizations that are behind these things. So just all we're asking you to do is just think critically of it and eat how you want and live how you want.
Yeah.
But just when you watch this information that's being, promoted like crazy all over Netflix or these places, just watch it with a critical eye, and no one's perfect. People make mistakes. We make mistakes all the time, but look at the motivations and where the money, just follow the money when you're looking at these things. That's all we're asking you to do.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.